A tape was sent to CBS's censors, and within minutes, alarm bells were ringing throughout the hallways. Instead of the usual light-hearted comedy routine, the screen was suddenly filled with a sharp, bold political message, one that went far beyond anything the network had ever allowed. The Smothers brothers were in rare form. "All right, you guys, I hired you as decorators. I want Billy the Kid to feel right at home," Tom quipped, launching into his bit. "First of all, I juggle one. Now two. Ho ho ho. Next, who's next?" But this wasn't just comedy anymore, it was provocation. 6 days later, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour was abruptly cancelled without explanation, without a press conference, and without a farewell. That controversial tape never aired, but its aftershocks rippled through the entire television industry, igniting a fierce confrontation between artists and network censors. From that moment on, the concept of free speech on American television was forever altered. What had happened behind the scenes? Who decided to pull the plug? And what was on that tape that sent CBS into such a panic? To understand the impact of this shocking incident that rewrote the rules of American television, we have to look back. In the 1960s, American television was tightly controlled by the Big Three networks, NBC, ABC, and CBS. Every evening, millions of families tuned in to watch shows that carefully conformed to the moral, political, and cultural standards of the post-war era. Among these, CBS dominated with safe hits like The Ed Sullivan Show and Bonanza. But as the anti-war movement gained traction and countercultural voices grew louder, CBS needed a way to hold on to its younger viewers. The idea for the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour wasn't born from artistic rebellion, but out of competition. CBS needed a show to compete with NBC's Sunday night ratings juggernaut. Tom and Dick Smothers, with their smart brother/dumb brother shtick, seemed like a safe, entertaining bet. The show debuted on February 5, 1967, and the first few episodes stuck to familiar variety show territory: musical numbers, playful banter, and inoffensive humor. But behind the scenes, Tom Smothers had a different vision. He saw an opportunity, not just for laughs, but for change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, he began injecting the show with sharp, satirical takes on real-world issues. While CBS focused on ratings, Tom crafted a new kind of television, one that didn't avoid reality but confronted it head-on. Dick played the voice of caution, often softening his brother's edgier moments, creating a balance that allowed the transformation to proceed without immediate pushback. Soon, the show featured prominent anti-war musicians like Pete Seeger, Joan Baez, Jefferson Airplane, and The Who. These performances weren't just entertainment, they were statements. Songs about war, injustice, and civil rights went out live to primetime audiences. Behind the scenes, the writers' room also evolved, bringing in young, politically minded talent like Steve Martin and Mason Williams. The comedy began skewing toward satire. Harmless jokes gave way to fictional debates about military policy, the church, and civil liberties, all hidden within the familiar structure of a variety show. The response was polarizing. Among younger viewers, particularly college students, the show became essential viewing. On campuses, fans quoted lines and passed around bootleg copies of controversial segments. But many parents, particularly in conservative regions, were outraged. Letters flooded CBS. Affiliates in the South threatened to pull the show. Yet the ratings remained strong, and CBS allowed it to continue, but with increasing scrutiny. Tensions rose as Tom began ignoring CBS's censorship deadlines, often delivering tapes late to preserve key material. Internally, CBS executives began to feel the loss of control. Despite the friction, the show entered its second season with momentum. Now more than a comedy show, it had become a rare platform for cultural dissent on mainstream television. Musical guests continued to test the limits. Jefferson Airplane performed a song with psychedelic overtones. The Who's performance of My Generation ended with smashed equipment and sound system failure. Joan Baez sang a song for her imprisoned husband, a known draft resistor, though CBS cut the dedication from the final broadcast. Even the comedy became more pointed. Pat Paulson, cast as a mock presidential candidate, delivered satirical campaign speeches that mocked political doublespeak. "If elected, I will build more potholes to test the patience of voters." Though seemingly absurd, the content struck a nerve, particularly with politicians and network executives. The final straw came with David Steinberg. A recurring guest, Steinberg performed monologues styled as religious sermons, but with biting, irreverent humor. In October 1968, one of his sketches, mixing biblical stories with anti-war commentary, drew over 300 complaints in a single week. Despite the backlash, students loved it. College newspapers published transcripts. Bootleg recordings circulated. But CBS, embarrassed and under pressure from affiliates and advertisers, tightened its grip. By early 1969, CBS was done playing along. They now demanded full scripts 10 days in advance. Tom routinely missed the deadlines. Friction turned into open conflict. When Tom invited Steinberg back again, despite CBS's explicit warnings, the network saw it as a direct challenge. The episode that followed, produced in April 1969, included Steinberg's most controversial segment yet. Dressed as a rabbi, Steinberg delivered a sermone linking the biblical story of Moses to the anti-war movement. Moses looked straight at Pharaoh, "Sorry, Mr. President," and said, "Take your army and go. I will not help you any longer." The line drew thunderous applause. To the CBS executives, it was a clear and dangerous attack on President Nixon. The episode ended with a symbolic performance by a folk group singing "No More Promised Lands," a song urging young people to reject government lies and redraw the map of their future. As Steinberg shouted, "Peace, not war. Preach it," and flung his shawl into the audience, the message was unmistakable. The tape was submitted as usual, but this time, CBS blocked it. Their reason: the episode had missed its review deadline. But the truth was plain: the line had been crossed for the last time. Tom Smothers immediately responded to CBS's decision by claiming the tape had been delivered to the Hollywood censors on time, arguing that the delay occurred at the network's New York headquarters where the review process had been unusually drawn out. Internal meetings at CBS, led by Chairman William Paley, resulted in a firm demand. David Steinberg's controversial performance had to be removed if the episode was to air. Tom refused. On April 4, 1969, CBS terminated its contract with the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour without a press conference or prior notice to viewers. The following week, the show's time slot was replaced with Hee Haw, a far less controversial rural comedy show. Although the banned episode never aired in the United States, a copy was shown in Canada by CTV, which wasn't bound by CBS's censorship policies. Bootleg VHS tapes of the episode quickly began circulating among college students and youth culture publications. College newspapers and alternative magazines ran detailed analyses of the episode, with one describing it as a bitter but worthy farewell for a show that dared to say what others avoided. Public reaction was deeply divided. Many young viewers considered CBS's actions a betrayal of free expression, and protests erupted in various cities, particularly near CBS affiliates. Meanwhile, conservative groups praised the network's decision, calling it a necessary act to protect public morals. The cancellation of the show became more than a programming change. It became a symbol of the cultural limits American television could not yet cross. There was no scandal, no financial meltdown, just a 5-minute anti-war sermon, and it was enough to end one of the country's most watched shows. For Tom and Dick Smothers, the cancellation was a devastating blow. Their television careers stalled immediately. Tom, seen as a defiant and politically risky figure, became nearly unemployable in the industry. Dick, though more cautious, was still tied to the image of the show and faced the same shutdown. Every opportunity once open to them seemed to vanish overnight. Behind the scenes, a quiet legal battle began. The Smothers brothers sued CBS for breach of contract, arguing that the network used the late delivery excuse to silence their political content. The lawsuit dragged on for 4 years, and in 1973, the court ruled in the brothers' favor, awarding them more than $770,000 for violating the co-production clause. Despite the legal win, they never returned to the prominence they once enjoyed. Their personal relationship also experienced strain. In later interviews, Dick revealed that he hadn't always agreed with Tom's hardline stance, believing that a few compromises might have allowed the show to survive and make a broader impact. Still, the brothers remained close off stage, continuing to tour live in small theaters and performing for loyal fans even after their television days ended. CBS's decision to cancel the show sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry. It served as a stark warning to younger creators about the risks of challenging power structures. One of those creators was Lorne Michaels, who would later go on to create Saturday Night Live. Michaels once said that without the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, there would be no SNL, highlighting the show's role as the first major experiment in mixing satire, music, and political commentary in mainstream television. The show's influence only grew after its demise. It became a symbol of censorship, its banned content traded on underground videotapes, its skits preserved in the private archives of former writers. Over time, public perception of the show evolved. What was once viewed as controversial became seen as visionary. In 2008, nearly 40 years after the show was taken off the air, Tom Smothers received an honorary Emmy Award. In his acceptance speech, he said simply, "Peace is harder than war," a quote that has since become one of the most remembered and meaningful reflections of the show's legacy. In 2010, Tom and Dick Smothers were inducted into the Television Academy Hall of Fame, a belated but powerful acknowledgement of their impact on American television and free speech. Beyond entertainment, their story has become an enduring part of the history of free expression in the U.S. In the early 1970s, both brothers were included on President Nixon's infamous enemies list. While they did not suffer the same consequences as some political figures, their inclusion was seen as undeniable proof that their show had struck a nerve with the administration, something few TV programs had ever achieved. By 2022, the entire archive of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, including original scripts, videotapes, and unaired sketches, was transferred to the University of California, Santa Barbara. For the first time, researchers could access internal documents, including sketches that CBS had once ordered destroyed. The digitization of this archive has begun reshaping the show's legacy, especially for younger audiences unfamiliar with the era of protest television. When Tom Smothers passed away in late 2023, social media was flooded with heartfelt tributes, vintage clips, and iconic stage photos. Comedians like Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, and Sarah Silverman honored him as a pioneer of modern political comedy, crediting him not just as a legend of the past but as a foundational influence on the bold, socially conscious comedy of today. Unexpectedly, the show has found renewed relevance through the internet. What once circulated as bootleg VHS tapes among college students is now easily accessible on platforms like YouTube, Reddit, and TikTok. Iconic lines like, "Mom always liked you best," have been reborn as meme soundtracks, and clips, such as Pat Paulson's fictional 1968 campaign promise to solve every problem by simply waiting, have gone viral in the context of today's political climate. Once censored sketches are now celebrated as classics of satire and resistance. The rediscovery of the Smothers Brothers is more than nostalgia. It's a long overdue recognition of how far ahead of its time the show truly was. Researchers, students, and documentary filmmakers continue to mine the UC Santa Barbara archives, discovering Tom Smothers' handwritten notes, unaired material, and detailed CBS response letters that together paint a vivid picture of the censorship battles the show endured. Small exhibitions showcase not just the final product but also the intense behind-the-scenes struggle for creative freedom. Modern comedians like John Oliver, Trevor Noah, and Hassan Minhaj have all acknowledged the influence of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, not necessarily for its format, but for its bold spirit. The show proved that comedy isn't just entertainment, it can be a vehicle for protest, awareness, and dialogue. Today, in media conferences and critical studies, the show is recognized as foundational to modern critical television. Though it no longer airs, its resonance lives on through its quotes, its cultural symbols, and its legacy of fearless dissent. When clips from the once-banned Forbidden Sermon were shown during a memorial at the New York Television Festival, younger viewers saw, many for the first time, just how daring and relevant the 1969 episode still feels. Far from outdated, its content remains surprisingly sharp, more direct and honest than much of today's sanitized media. Looking back, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour didn't call itself iconic, it became iconic because of the reaction it provoked. From viewers, from networks, from politicians, and ultimately from American culture itself. A show once canceled for speaking out now stands as a powerful example of how television can be daring, dissenting, and unapologetically bold. So, if you believe the story of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour is not just a relic of the past but a message that still matters, leave a comment. What would it mean if such a show aired today? Like and share this video with anyone who loves television, freedom of speech, and wants to understand why a comedy act once caused a national controversy. And if you haven't already, subscribe. There are countless untold stories, banned episodes, and silenced voices waiting to be heard again, just like the Smothers Brothers, who were never truly silenced.